was not raised in the church and didn't have any exposure to the gospel as a child. So I can recall a time in junior high when my mother had taken me and my sister to church, but she went to church and I went to the gym and played basketball with the guys. And that was my church experience until I was about 21, that I was working with a lady and she invited me to go to a Bible church with her. And at first I didn't want to go, but she kept inviting me and asking me, and our friendship grew stronger, and so I wanted to go to see what it was all about. And living in a small mountain town, it was a very small church of about maybe 30 members class. And I remember they were learning the books of the Bible, and we met in the pastor's study, and they went through all the books from Genesis to Revelation, and I didn't know anything about the Bible. And so that night I went to Walmart and I bought my first Bible and I took it home. And of course, not knowing anything about it, I didn't realize that there were different translations, and I wound up buying a King James version. So it was very difficult to read, not being a believer. About 3 months later, we wound up moving to Kerrville. We did join the church in November thinking that I was saved and not knowing all of this back then. And the following February, Chris called me one day and asked me, and he noticed that on my application it said I'd never been baptized. And he asked me if there was a reason why. And I said, no, I just never really had the opportunity. And so we met, and I knew long before I walked in there that I wasn't really saved. God had already been working on my heart and showing me things, and questions began to come up over the sermons that I'd heard. And but I didn't know that God knew that, and I certainly didn't know Chris knew it. But after our talk, it became evident that I wasn't saved. And one of the things he asked me was who Christ was, and I said he was the son of Mary and Joseph, and that was the only thing that I really remember. And I left there, and I felt so embarrassed that I didn't know anything, and I thought, I'm never coming back here again. But God really laid it on my heart, and I did come back. And Chris actually set me up in a discipleship class with Mary Craig, and we went through the fundamentals of the faith. And it was about halfway through that study that April, we went to a ladies' retreat, and I decided that I wasn't going to go because I felt like I didn't belong because I wasn't saved and I didn't deserve to be there. But I felt God really did everything to get me there. And that night I was talking to my mom, and I was upset about some things that had been going on, and I had already confessed something to my friend, and she had forgiven me. And so that night at the ladies' retreat, I was upset over those things. And I remember sitting outside that night talking to my mom, and she told me about how she had come to know the Lord, and that she had always been taught that it's always what you have to do to try and please yourself to God, but she finally realized that she could do nothing apart from Christ. And that night I remember just laying there on the bed at Camp Eagle and crying, and I knew the next morning, and I praying for forgiveness, and I knew the next morning that I had been born again, and I knew that God had saved me that night. And God has continued to grow my faith over my years through experiences, through school and work and with my family, and I'm just very thankful for the gift of this church and the members and how they edify one another.